With every catastrophic or devastating world event, and for every seemingly senseless act of violence, there's a certain phenomenon that occurs, especially in the wake of the World Wide Web. A lot of people like to call them conspiracy theories, but I like to call it fear-mongering paranoia, and you've heard them all. I mean, in fact, it's a full-blown industry now. Everything from Obama being planted as a Muslim infiltrator to the fact that the government is spraying all of us from the air with deadly chemicals on a daily basis around the world. And there's no shortage that have arisen out of the latest Sandy Hook tragedy. Sorry. Some claim that the parents of the children on television are paid actors, that Adam Lanza and James Holmes were both mind-controlled government pawns used just to pass gun control legislation. And even going as far as saying that the Batman movie is somehow complicit in the mass shootings. Not a joke. So to talk about the nature of why these theories develop and the potential damage they do to healthy skepticism about government narratives, I'm joined by RT producer Rachel Kurzius.
How's it going, Abby?
Hi, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
So I like to call this fear-mongering paranoia. You know, it's really interesting because all of these theories just arise immediately in the wake of anything without really any evidence coming out to back them up. What do you think about that assessment of the fear-mongering paranoia?
Well, I think that the paranoia part is dead on, but in terms of fear-mongering, to me, I think it's much scarier to envision that one person on their own could just snap and do something and that a government safety net or other kinds of support systems couldn't help them. To me, the idea that someone could be acting alone and totally irrationally is much scarier than the idea of like one government plot. And it's more complicated to imagine that someone, you know, your guest earlier said that the reasons for violence are so complicated, and they are. And I think that that makes it so much scarier because it means we have to think a lot harder before we come to any kind of solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I call it fear-mongering because people who have capitalized on the industry of it, people like Alex Jones, who, I mean, immediately you see them making videos and really selling, I mean, they're making money. And it's the fear-mongering to keep people scared of the government and perpetual state of fear that the government is this overarching villain who's responsible for everything. But it's really like what you just said. It's the oversimplification of something that's much more complex and that people can't really grasp, that one person acting alone would do something so horrific.
Yeah, and I think that it's healthy if it's difficult for us to grasp what would bring someone to do that, but it's also healthy to imagine that what they're doing could be interconnected with a lot of our actions, even if we can't relate to them on a personal basis.
It reminds me of someone, you know, a creationist or someone who, and I'm not bucking you if you're a creationist at all, but I mean, it's almost like denying just a whole mountain of evidence and just saying it's too hard for me to understand how evolution works or how science works, so I'm just going to kind of defer everything to God's making.
I'd rather not clean my room, even if the clothes keep piling up and up and up, and it just gets harder and harder. Yeah, it's kind of the same thing.
And let's talk about some of these theories because they're so bizarre. I mean,
they are absolutely insane.
And I've been getting hollered at a lot from people who watch the show saying, how come you're not covering these? You're selling out, the LIBOR scandal thing. I really wanted to talk about this really quickly because people have claimed that the two fathers of Adam Lanza and the other guy, I don't even want to say that house, who shall not be named, their fathers were going to testify for LIBOR. It's actually a complete hoax. It's not true.
Oh, it's not true. I mean, I didn't even know whether or not that was true. And, you know, even if it were true, someone was saying, you know, it's kind of viable to me because if that were the case, their fathers probably work really hard and they didn't have a man around in the house, so this is what led to it. And I was just like, really?
Yeah.
You know, it's that, I mean, people are going now into Adam Lanza's corpse, and there are geneticists working with the FBI to figure out what is this gene that made him tick? What is it that made him do this? Is it, you know, absent fathers? Is it mothers? Is it video games? And, you know, it isn't any one of those things, and I think that that's something that's difficult. The fact that we can't just put it in a box and say, okay, no more video games, now everyone's set, and we're all going to be safe from here on out.
More guns, less guns. It's a lot more complex.
Right. It's like we have to move away from third grade arithmetic and start getting into like the more complex stuff we learned a little later in high school.
Well, that's hard for the media to grasp, really. And let's talk. The multiple shooters thing is also really fascinating to me because people are reliant. First of all, there's multiple shooters reported in the wake of any hysteria. I mean, we're talking about a really traumatic event, and they're relying on testimony from 5-year-old children telling the media, yes, I saw this person running in the woods, I saw this person. I mean, that's really hard to rely upon and say, it was staged, it's a psyop, it's a black government,
I mean, just because there's a lot of confusion in the middle of a horrific tragedy doesn't mean that there's some sort of nefariousness behind the information spilling out. I think that Sandy Hook was a great example of the media doing the best that it could, but it wasn't good enough. It's never good enough, because how are you supposed to know everything right away? That's why these investigations take months and months and months.
Right, absolutely. And I wanted to talk about the main damage that this does, I think, which is really deflect people from movements and healthy criticism. I mean, I question everything that the government tells me. I question government narratives. I think that it's really important. And I also believe in some conspiracy theories. I think that the media and establishment has taken this term, made it a really pejorative term, and they use it to shut down the dialogue. Do you think that the term conspiracy theory is overused to kind of shut down any healthy skepticism?
Yeah, well, I think that a lot of people would use, just as you said, pejoratively, to say, oh, well, Abby, why are you talking about that on your show? It's a conspiracy theory, as opposed to maybe thinking about it and saying, okay, listen, maybe the idea of a conspiracy theory is something like people are acting in these shadowy, dark rooms to keep you down. And what makes me upset about that is it totally takes away my agency, right? Because if people are talking in some back room, I have no control over what's happening. But if I believe that this is, you know, the government is an institution, but all institutions are made up of little people.
Right. It totally takes away our responsibility, takes away our autonomy to act.
And the ability of people in government who can act better and who might, if we contact them and recognize what that's at stake.
And we need to do that. We really need to differentiate between reality and you know,
wacko.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on, shedding some
really
light on it.
Glad to be here, Abby.
Rachel
Thanks for having
Kurzius,
me.
RT producer. All right, so every day I keep asking you guys to write me and let me know what you think about the show. Well, yesterday, after my segment on paranoia damaging the truth movement, I've been getting a lot of hate mail. Let me explain one point that may have gotten lost in what I said. I'm not trying to call anyone's beliefs crazy. I'm trying to make us smarter and more critical thinkers. On a side note, I think Alex Jones and InfoWars have done a lot of great, crucial work that has woken up a ton of people for years and years. However, there seems to be a movement of people who immediately seize on every single bad thing that happens, including hurricanes, mass murders, and assert that they're all being fixed by the government to fulfill an overarching agenda. And I mean immediately, like in the minutes following these disasters, before any of the facts are even laid out. Healthy skepticism and criticism about the government is absolutely imperative in this day and age. Government narratives are not to be trusted. But before you start making speculative claims, you need to be armed with facts. This is about questioning everything, including the claims of the alternative media. Those seeking truth about real, provable conspiracies are discredited when people jump on bandwagons that peddle alternative theories with little to no evidence to back them up. For example, the millions of people around the world who have questions about 9/11 and the victims' families that are pursuing a new investigation are now lumped in with the same movement that's claiming that every mass shooting is staged. We don't all want to be the boys who cried wolf here. We want to present hard-hitting questions backed by real evidence. That's the only way the alternative voice can maintain its credibility. And with that said, I wanted to address a few specific comments from YouTube's No Name, No Fame, who says at the end of the allegory of the cave piece that I did, he says, why was the JFK assassination mentioned at the end? Now she looks like one of those insane conspiracy theorists. So, I just can't win. So I'm labeled a conspiracy theorist because of my questions about the impossibility of the JFK assassination to have happened as the government claims it did. Yet when I don't jump on board about chemtrails or Sandy Hook being a black op, the movement turns against me. All I can do is say my truth as I see it. Moving on to Twitter, at MarkJC1 says, I can't believe you're parroting anti-gun propaganda. I'm unfollowing you. Well, apparently there are a bunch of people under the impression that RT as a network is pushing an agenda of gun control. And I'll just say this, I'm pro-Second Amendment. In fact, I own a firearm. I just wish people would take every other amendment of the Bill of Rights as seriously as the second. Also, I think it's kind of naive, maybe this is just me, to say that simply having guns is a realistic way to protect yourself against the most massive and oppressive military force in the world. In fact, I haven't said one thing that rails against or for guns on the show because I think it's worth talking about the underlying issues of violence in the wake of these mass shootings instead of peddling what the mainstream media is. Still on Twitter, at Graceful Biscuit, says, keep moving closer to Fox News. Maybe you can become their anchor. Hashtag say it isn't so. Wow, I had no idea that I was a neoconservative hate monger. And if you think that I resemble anything that Fox offers, then I don't know if you've actually been watching the show, sir. From YouTube, a comment from I Love Akiz Forever says, what I want Oliver Stone to answer is how are we supposed to deal with terrorism and our enemies? All Oliver Stone does is complain about how rights are being taken away, but what answers does he have to deal with real problems such as terrorism, which is the primary reason why all these new laws exist in the first place? What this YouTuber doesn't realize is that there is no threat of terrorism to Americans. The government justifies taking away our freedoms to catch terrorists, but we're more likely to die of accidental suffocation in bed than we are of a terrorist attack in this country. So really, the true way to deal with stopping terrorism is to stop bombing countries. When people get bombed and their families get murdered for no reason, those people tend to become radicalized against their oppressors, i.e. the United States. And finally, from YouTube, Teal Aloy says, I think I'll try an experiment and making Breaking the Set my only source for news. Great idea, Teal. I hope the experiment is going well for you, and thanks so much for writing, watching, and for your thoughts. Yes, even the trolls.